Kia ora, everyone. It's super lovely to have you all. It's a good attendance today, and just want to quickly start off with some housekeeping. And so if you look on the chat side of things, there are some instructions there, but basically we can't hear you, we can't see you, but we would love for this to be interactive. So submit your questions so that our very lovely speakers will be able to answer them for you. Or if you really resonate with what they're sharing, you can also just, do all the different reactions that there is. So I might kick off with the formal part and actually start off with our session today. So welcome to Clear the Air. I'm hosted by me, Dr. Angela Lim. I'm a medical doctor and co-founder of Clearhead, a modern-day data-driven employee wellbeing EAP provider. So we speak with experts and get real and raw on the existential questions that covers the well-being questions that have puzzled humans for millennia. Today, we're looking at what we can do to improve the mental resilience of those in the construction and manufacturing industry, where the pressures of the jobs are really high. We also understand that it has traditionally been very hard to reach the stereotypical blue-collar worker, as due to the stigma, they feel the need to portray an image of toughness and that everything is all right. However, what we know from the research, for example, is that construction workers are 6 times more likely to lose their lives due to suicide than in a workplace accident. Joining me today are 3 very special guests. We'll kick off with mates in construction field workers Nicole and Nathan. Mates in Construction is an industry-backed, research-based suicide prevention and support program to share the insights they have learned on site. Then we will get Rob to share his personal story about how he got to the brink of suicide and how he turned it all around as a founder of Beard Brothers, award-winning sausages and one of Deloitte's top 50 fastest-growing companies of 2022. So to kick us off, I'd love to kind of have a chance for Nicole and Nate to kind of share a little bit about what they've learned through being on site. Would you like to start us off, Nate?
Awesome. Kia ora. My name's Nate. I'm one of the field officers for Mates in Construction based here in Christchurch. I work alongside Nicole. Together, we look primarily after the supplier residential side of it, the likes of placemakers, GJ Gardner, and other partners within that space. Both of us field officers for Mates in Construction, basically, as it was touched on, we focus primarily on the mental health aspect, gearing towards the suicide awareness and suicide prevention within the construction industry. A lot of the work that we do focuses on education, raising awareness, as well as giving people the tools and skills to be able to help and support people in this space. As you sort of touched on, there's definitely a lot of challenges within the industry itself. Construction, as you mentioned, there's sort of stigma around mental health, and how we can actually break those initial barriers down is one of the biggest challenges that we face. In terms of Nicole?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Nicole. I'm one of the field officers and case managers at Mates in Construction. For us, we've been working up and down the country since March this year. We've been established up in Auckland since 2019, where they have been looking after the industry up there predominantly due to the barriers of travel in the country. We've really taken off down here in the South Island over the last couple of months, looking into what are the challenges for the construction workers up and down the country, and how can we actually get some help in there when the mental health system and the health system is struggling at the moment in time. What we're hearing from people is that they are working long hours, they're working away from home, there's a serious staff shortage like there is in most industries at this point in time, and there is that bullying culture and that culture of not being able to speak up, whether that be because they already have the mentality on site or whether it's the environment that they have actually been brought up in as well. We are looking at changing that and trying to change it gradually to make sure that people understand that there is safe places, that there is helplines and national support there for them to tap into. Some of the other challenges that we are also hearing is that financial challenge. They're struggling to make ends meet. Some of our construction families are actually, there's one person working within the household and they're then trying to provide for a number of mouths rather than just 1 or 2, or they're coming out of school with high expectations of what they are actually going to be able to achieve with that living wage or that introductory wage as well.
Yeah, those are very tricky, aren't they? Because what you're really saying is that these are often what we call the psychosocial factors or the root causes of why people aren't staying well. What are the things that you have seen worked when you talked about, for example, if I was to kind of summarize, you've talked about financial challenges, you talked about bullying, you talked about workload, and you talked about working from home. These are all very much institutional factors that are happening in almost every construction company. What are the things that you have seen worked that have addressed some of these root causes?
I believe personally raising awareness has been a key attribute to actually providing some success in this space, because for a lot of people they're unaware, they don't know, and they're aware of these issues and they're very hesitant to actually talk and discuss about a lot of these issues. So raising that awareness firstly has definitely been a big stepping stone for us.
Yeah. And highlighting that the support is out there for them. So construction has very much been an industry for a number of years where wellbeing has been something that they have either had to include in there to win jobs, or it is something sort of fluffy that's been danced around for a long time. I know for myself, working in the industry for a number of years, then if you provided fruit on a Monday and a barbecue on a Friday, then they believed that wellbeing was the box ticked there. It is then sort of opening up these new avenues of support and actually understanding what is wellbeing and how does that impact our health, both mentally and physically, across the board, regardless of what walks of life we have, whether our trauma is from childhood trauma, adult trauma, or whether it is that financial and relationship issue that people are struggling from as well. There's certainly more and more support out there, and also a lot of people sharing their own individual stories. So that makes them a lot more relatable. It makes your own problems, your own struggles more understandable. You're comfortable to understand that someone else might have been going through that, because we're beginning to speak up a lot more. But that culture is only going to slowly change. But the fact that we are starting to see some changes in that is huge as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really key in this context is like you can't solve a problem that you don't know exists. And I think the first part of that is raising awareness, which is people feeling safe enough to kind of speak up about it, and also making sure that organizations do have good support in place. For example, what we know that we've learned at Clearhead is having a space in which people can confidentially reach out. Often, what the research also shows is having a digital platform allows for people to feel like they're not burdening anyone, and they can just reach out and try and figure it out themselves. It's a good start for a lot of people. And most companies have EAP providers, which basically the employer pays for the funded support. Clearhead is one of them, and we've worked with the construction industry as well. So, really making sure that highlighting that, you don't have to suffer alone, even if you're not ready to speak up, I think is really important around signposting that there are these support available in that context. And then over time, when people actually have a good experience with the help that they receive, and we're sort of, we'll bring that up with Rob, is that, once they go through the tough time, they've learned the skills to stay resilient. They often become the biggest advocate about what you can do in terms of staying mentally well. So that's all really key in terms of making sure those support structures are in place. Nate and Nicole, do you find that because of the stigma and because of the type of people that would be working in the construction industry, how do they define well-being, or how do they define what staying well means to them? Because I think sometimes it can come across as very fluffy, and people would dismiss it. So how do they define well-being that you find resonates with them, that you can share with us?
I think really in terms of defining well-being from a construction industry point of view, because you're right, a lot of people, especially in that line of work, do find it as quite fluffy, but it's just being able to break down and normalize a lot of the things that we enjoy, that sort of self-care aspect of it, and being able to fill your bucket in those spaces, because it's one of those things I know a lot of us guys, particularly in this industry, tend to put on the back burner, especially with a lot of long working hours, a lot of time away from home. It's very hard to fill a lot of those buckets.
How do you help them make time? Because it can become something that you just deprioritize, isn't it? So how do you help people make time or what do you tell them that gives them the motivation to put those daily practice in place?
It's breaking it into smaller pieces, so breaking it down into, well, we use the Tafari Tapafa counselling programme and outset framework to look at that. So it's breaking it down into that physical, the spiritual, the mental, and that family health. So actually recognise what do they have in place already. So a lot of the times it becomes routine and we don't take everything from it. We move that positive aspect to it from the side because we rely on that just as everyday work, and we don't recognise that it does bring us happiness, that it does bring us to like content. So it's picking up on that and then saying, okay, so where can we build on this? What sort of percentage are you looking at for your family bucket, for example? Where does that sit with you? If you're in a low percentage, then how can we then bring in that family connection more? And also looking at the fact that a lot of our construction industry is actually migrant workers, whether it be from another country, another culture, or from another town or city as well, then we can create our own families within these small communities too, that we can get the same amount of love and support from, that then become part of your family as well. So recognising that and actually pulling from that strength as well.
Yeah, I think what you've described really is recognizing that sometimes these are the constraints of the job, that they will be working away from home because they're away from, because of the site that they have to be on, and they can't really work from home from this perspective. And so, if we know, for example, holistically having good support structures, is something that's really important. How do you do that with your workmate? And how do you, make sure you address bullying concerns that have been identified rather than just ignoring it because you kind of actually, it becomes a double whammy in that context. I think maybe before we move on to Rob, just a final question. You mentioned basically the type of people who are working in the construction industry are migrants, and you mentioned, applying indigenous frameworks of well-being like Te Whare Tapafa. What are the cultural considerations that you see when you have these migrants, Māori and Pacifica people that are more likely to be working in the industry?
Well, I guess, yeah, you're right. We do have a large variety of cultures, people from all over the world, pretty much, that we speak to and we try to touch base to. And it's really quite an interesting space because everyone views mental health in such a different way. All these different communities view it in such a varying lights. And even for us here in New Zealand, we have that sort of stoic, stigmatized view on mental health. And it is pretty similar amongst a lot of the other cultures that we talk to, especially our Māori and Pacifica communities. It can be one of those things that no one really wants to talk about. We want to keep in the shadows, and it can be quite difficult to bring it to light. For us, really, it is, I guess, ultimately about being transparent, acknowledging the diversity within the industry, and the fact that when it comes to, obviously, mental health and suicide in the space, that there is no discrimination. So really trying to highlight that as it can affect anyone in every aspect. And we all deal, as Nicole touched on, having that sense of community, that sense of family, or even that sense of tribe. And being away from that, it can be really difficult. So trying to, I guess, reach out to everyone. We offer our training in a variety of languages, as well as our resources in a variety of languages, just so we can reach and touch base. I think the one key factor that really helps with us is that we do a lot of on-the-ground work. So FaceTime, so we can actually be there in person to communicate, have that sort of, we are people, this is us at face value. And I believe that really helps in breaking that sort of cultural boundary down, or barriers down.
I agree.
And like Nate touched on, is that availability of resources in a range of different languages, but also our team come from a background of a huge amount of cultures, and that's where we really play on a lot of strengths as well, because we can relate. And it's also taken that responsibility to acknowledge that I might not be the person that can help that individual right now, but I can identify someone else within our organisation who may be more relatable or understand that culture better as well, so that we can embrace that at the same time. We are forever doing research surveys and also research into the different programs that we can offer as well, to ensure that we are getting the word right out there. But that's where the feedback is great on our forms too, that if it isn't sort of relating to them, that they can let us know that information as well. We understand that for some cultures in particular, our Maori population and also our Pacific Island, that they have been brought up in an environment where they do push that feeling or those emotions down, and the area or the space to chat is limited. So we want people to feel comfortable that they can either speak up in that room or that they can tick the box, and we can then have that interaction with them out with the site as well.
Yeah, I think what we're really highlighting is that, ultimately providing culturally responsive support is very important. And that could be either the resources they consume and languages they understand, or even the clinicians that they see. So what we know, for example, at Clearhead, is just getting whoever is available is not helpful. It's how can I get someone that this person can relate to, has expertise in the challenges that they're trying to face, really address that root causes. And sometimes it's, I'm an Indian person and I want to speak to someone who is of an Indian background. And sometimes it's the opposite. Actually, this is too close of a community for me and I want to speak to someone who's not in my community. So there is no one size fit all. And I think one of the things that we're increasingly recognizing as we support employers is that you need to think about how you provide support at scale, but doing it in a way that's individualized to the individual. Otherwise, the help is not going to be very helpful. So thank you so much for sharing that, Nate and Nicole, around some of the insights that you've learned at an aggregate level on site. And I'm so pleased to be able to bring Rob on because he'll be able to share some of his personal experience on what he went through. And you'll find that some of the stuff that he talks about actually gets picked up at an aggregate level that Nate and Nicole talks about. So Rob, before we, now that we are kicking off, would love to hear from you a little bit about your story and what's brought you to be such a champion about the importance of mental health today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dr. Angela. Yeah, well, I suppose my journey started 12 years ago when I started the business. Started with a small business, Wild Game Salamis, and then started Beard Brothers Small Goods. So I suppose what makes me passionate about this is from what I went through to where I am now, and I'm just your typical normal Kiwi fella, like I say, the normal guy with the stigma around mental health and all that sort of stuff. I thought I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and that's who I was. My sister took her own life 2011, and I often wondered, how could somebody sort of do that? And that sort of it sat in the back of my head for a long time. So to get to where I got to, which was 3.5 years ago, which was absolute rock bottom, was an accumulative of a lot of things happening in time. So I'd left my job, was managing vineyards and all that sort of stuff, and I had this dream to start up a business making salamis and sausages for hunters. And being a keen hunter, that's what I used to do in my free time. So I walked away from a pretty well-paid job, pretty well respected in the industry, and brought a shipping container and planted on the back of my house, my wife and I, and started Wild Game Salamis. So not a butcher by trade, just an absolute hobby. And right from the day dot, put myself under a lot of pressure. I mean, we had 2 boys then, and we had another one on the way. And of course, you can imagine mortgage payments, and I had a shipping container. I'm not a butcher, so we had to come up with some money. And so the only way to do that is the old school way, was just to work really, really hard. So that's what we did. So we started Wild Game Salamis, and then the business just started slowly growing, and fast forward, I think it was 2015 or 16, one or the other. We were working. But my wife and I were working 7 days a week. So I was working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, doing all the hunters stuff and all that sort of stuff. And then on the Friday, we were making stock for the farmers markets, which we would do Saturday, Sunday. Lara would look after the kids, look after the shop on the Sunday. And then it was just like that. It was just a revolving 100-hour weeks every week. But I never thought that it would catch up on me. And so It was 2015 or 16, I think. Yeah, so I had a heart attack, and that really sort of gave me a bit of a wake up call. So that was I was just lying in bed at night feeling super sore chest, sore jaw, sore arms. So I sat there lying in bed, and I was saying to Lara, "Shit, I'm crook, something's wrong with me." And so we're sitting there Googling signs of a heart attack, and I remember my old man had a heart attack. He goes, "Oh, you having a heart attack?" I said, "No, I don't think so. I think I've pulled a muscle." So I got up, stood, walked around, did all that sort of stuff, and then about 6 o'clock in the morning, I thought, this is quite bad. So I jumped in my shitty old Hilux and trundled myself to the hospital, and I'd had a real massive heart attack. So like a blood clot thing, it's gone through my heart, whatever. So that was a bit of a wake up call. Sitting there, with the wife and 3 kids, and lying in a hospital bed after having a heart attack with a lot of debt and a lot of dreams and aspirations, thinking, oh my goodness, what have I done? I'd overcooked myself. So from there, we thought we've got to work a little bit smarter, not harder. So that's when we come up with the idea to work with Beard Brothers. So Beard Brothers is our sausages and our small goods. My original recipes, the name comes from our 3 sons. So the second name is Beard, three brothers, Beard Brothers. That's how that started. And I suppose that gave me a new lease of life. 2016, we won New Zealand's best Savile, I think it was, like a gold medal, which put us on the map. And then we just steadily started to grow, and the growth was quite scary, but it was manageable and tangible. Well, I thought it was, because you could see, every store would get. So we started into the supermarkets, and so what that took to get into the supermarkets was a massive effort. Now, I've been to, I reckon, 90% of every single supermarket, New World, Foursquare, and Pack and Save in New Zealand. I would hang my hat on it that I've probably been to all of them, actually. So only up until September last year, I did all the sales myself. So, which was door knocking. So really determined sort of guy. But of course, with what was happening, and unbeknownst to me, and I've talked to Dr. Angela about this in the past, what happens is, I call it like a bow tie effect, so there's rock bottom, but leading up to that, there's like this funnel of shit that happens to get to that spot. So with me, the business really took off. It really started to take off just before COVID, and it was crazy. And I consider myself a pretty quick thinker, fast thinker, really good problem solver, solutions, all that sort of thing. And then the business started to really grow, and I had to get this tray packing machine, and it threw me. This tray packing machine was the only way we could get more volume into the supermarkets. And I'll never forget it. I think it was 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. It started. My actual meltdown started like 10 days, 14 days before the actual event. So I remember trying to sleep, and I just couldn't sleep. I could not sleep, and I just had this overwhelming, this thing of anxiety and fear, and I normally back myself, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't see the result that I was after. And what I mean by that is, we had to change the whole factory around, and I just couldn't get my head around how it was all going to work, which is normally bread and butter for me. So looking back at it now, that was the first signs, really. I mean, there's a lot of signs leading up to it, but I was going hard still. I was going really, really hard and pushing hard, but I thought I was enjoying it until that time when the sleep stopped. And then, I think I was up to like 8 days, something like that, because I've just when I say no sleep, it might be 2 hours or something like that. Living on no dose and V and all that sort of shit, heaps of coffee, just to try to get through it. And then one morning, I just woke up, and it was like a light switch in my brain was like, that's it, I'm out. And what I mean by that is I couldn't deal with it anymore. I actually wanted to kill myself. And, my brain had manifested itself into this horrible enemy, and was just telling myself, I want to take myself out. I don't want to be on this. I don't want to be on this planet anymore. I don't want to be here. And it was horrible. It was horrible. I mean, looking back at it now, it was one of the most, well, not the most horriblest things I've ever been to. I mean, I buried my sister. That was pretty bad. But being in that same situation where the brain just tells itself, you want out. And so there was this massive thing in my head just kept going on. You're a failure, because it was tough, money and all that. It was tough trying to be a dad, trying to be a husband, trying to make money, trying to keep everyone happy, keep everyone afloat. And it just got to me and it just snuck up on me. And then one morning I woke up and I was like, right, that's it. I'm out. And then the plan began to take myself to kill myself. And so the really horrible part about it was the calmness in which I felt, which is, it was a horrible feeling. It's looking back at it, it was just this horrible, calm feeling. I didn't really care about anybody. I didn't care about my kids, my wife, my mum, my dad, who'd been through all this with my sister. I didn't care about anything. I mean, I wrote them all letters. I wrote my mum and dad letters. I wrote my kids the 21st letters. I did the whole lot, and there was just no sense of, it was just a calmness. It was an absolute calmness. And so I had the plan was there to do it. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it was stopped with a pretty close nick of time type thing. And it was probably the worst day of my life. And just I don't want anyone ever listening to this or anything to get even close to being in that situation, because from there, from that morning, I was taken pretty much out of the whole environment of life by doctors and all that sort of shit for 6 weeks. As I'm a proud dad. I take my kids hunting and pig hunting and all that sort of stuff, and they saw me as almost like a vegetative state for 6 weeks, just sitting at home looking out the window, just broken, absolutely broken. And I still there's a sense of embarrassment there for me with my boys, but they've really sort of embraced it as well. They've seen your old man hit the low, and I wasn't doing it for Rob Beard. That's the thing. Wasn't doing it for me personally. I was just doing it for everything, for everyone, for the family, for the whole lot. And I just didn't see the signs. So from there was this massive journey.
I mean, we might just pause there. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and I could see that it is still something that is very, close to who you are, and that even, time has passed and you have healed, it is still very triggering for you. And so I guess just also to say, for anyone listening, if this is triggering in any way, please make sure you reach out for help. You can reach out for help to the people around you. If your employer has funded support, please reach out there. Or, if you have a public system, health insurance, whatever it is, if this was triggering for you, please don't suffer in silence. I just want to maybe, before we dive into where, the next step, which is about you getting better, want to kind of maybe summarize a little bit of what you've described, which is the lead up to the point that you got to wanting to complete a suicide attempt. So there were often someone doesn't just wake up one day and want to commit suicide. It's often it does build up, and what we want to be doing as people around them, as the support network, as employers, is making sure that we're thinking about how do we spot these signs much earlier. And so you mentioned a few things, and these are actually relatively common, and I'll bring them up. So one, obviously, which you mentioned, was just the sheer overwork. working that you did, right? 100 hours a week, people might be able to sustain that for a short period of time, but it sounded like you sustained it for a very long time, to the point that, it was causing you anxiety. It was causing you to not sleep very well. It was causing you to not think very clearly. And then when the brain doesn't have, think about if you have an old laptop and you leave it running the whole time, once it's kind of keeps burning away like that, then it starts to short circuit a little bit, which is kind of what's happened. Then you started to have those thoughts that was not helpful. Instead of what you said, you used to back yourself and you used to think clearly. Now these were thoughts about you being a failure, and that sort of kind of started to spiral towards that bow tie that you talked about, isn't it? So like, initially the first sign was just working too much and then not sleeping well, and then now it's like these thoughts that says I want to, I don't feel like I could continue like this, and you couldn't. The reality was that was your body trying to tell you this is not sustainable for you to keep like this. And what you want to be able to do then is ask for help much earlier in those moments. But in that time, it sounded like, you said, it's fine, I can manage, so often what we find is that people don't have the insights that they are struggling. And that's, again, where you as employers, as support networks, as HR individuals have the opportunity to sit down and get in and just ask the question, how are you feeling? Are you coping? Are you sleeping well? That gives people that moment in time to pause, to go like, actually, maybe this is not normal. Then where you got to was you got to the point where that's the part that we get really scared of as clinicians, because that's the part where you actually had a plan. So having suicidal thoughts is actually a relatively common symptom when someone is in a state of depression. Where you got to really was quite that extreme end. So where you got to was you got to a point of what we call depersonalization. You stopped, that sort of eerie calmness that you talked about. That was the depersonalization at its most extreme, where you started to not care about the people that you used to love. And what you've gotten to at that point was like you just wanted an out from the situation that you're in. You came up with this really clear plan, and often that is the most identifying sign that someone is at the highest risk. If they can actually tell you like, and this is my plan, this is where I will go, this is how I will do it, this is what time I'll do it, which is kind of, when we chatted, you really had that plan. Fortunately for you, you were stopped by friends who were alerted and was sending up basically the cops to kind of try and find you and make sure that nothing bad happens. So, we all can do our bit from that perspective. And then obviously it wasn't just like, we pulled you out of it and then everything was fine. Obviously you went through 6 weeks of, like you said, you felt like a vegetable, and that level where your body literally is shut down, that is, again, the most extreme state of depression. And so you never really want to get through all of that. And I think the whole point of all of this is to say that, if you as an individual are listening to us right now and this is triggering for you, or these sound familiar and you're like, oh yeah, I'm currently going down that funnel, please, all we ask is you ask for help. Reach out 100%. To people that you can trust, because in this case, you had briefly talked to this friend, and this friend knew enough to kind of want to be searching for you because they were worried. And then you, of course, you said even after all of this, you still feel a little bit of shame. There is no shame, we know that every single person at some point of their life will go through some of this. And for some for most, we are able to have the support system to kind of work through it over time. It's a shitty place to be in for however long it lasts for. And for some, it's a little too late, and we lose the people that we love. So just wanted to highlight, like, these are very common signs that you can actually identify as friends, as family, as colleagues, as employers. So let's talk about a little bit now. So you went through all that darkness, but then you said it's a bow tie. So then you started to take that step out towards things being not so dark anymore. What were the first few things that worked for you, that helped you get out onto that next stage?
I think the biggest thing for me was to almost reset, Angela, like that, just to reset, like to I know there was days people would laugh at me. There would be days, and I'd just sit there looking at a tree for maybe an hour. I don't know, something like that. Because what happened is the state of the brain. Once I started slowly coming out of this horribleness, and my life slowly started to come back on track, and I prioritized, which was prioritizing myself and not work. So I was taken out of work, which was hard, but I just didn't care. So I had a whole lot of people jumped in, which was amazing. Ran the business while I wasn't there. So the biggest thing for me to slowly start getting right was to live in the present. So be really, really present in the day. Be extremely grateful. And I know it sounds really airy-fairy, especially from me. But it was, I wouldn't call it meditation, but it was just something that I became super in tune with life. I became super in tune with life. Like, people would think I was wasted, because like a bird would fly over and I go, wow, look at that bird, it's cool, you know. So this is what slowly started to happen. I found my body starting to come right. And then there'd be days there within that 6 weeks to 8 weeks there that I'd go for a walk, and I'd have to be someone would have to come with me for 6 weeks, whatever it was, because I'd look at a tree and look at the branch and go, oh yeah, that'd be a good place to die, or whatever, you know. So those thoughts I never thought I'd have those thoughts, but slowly but surely they just sort of went away. I don't know if you can see that, but I did draw my little bow tie. So this was the sleeping, the non-sleeping and all that, and it was heading to the downfall, which is the rock bottom, which is there. And of course, this is it coming out the other side, but it's an open-ended bow tie, because we don't want it to happen again. We don't want it to go like that again, because that's not where we need to be. So and coming out of it now, I've never probably, I've got shit going on in my life right now, but I've never been so happy in life itself. It's something that I read the signs now big time. So I really read the signs. So I know if I have, say, 3 or 4 really bad nights sleep and my mind's really starting to race and I just calm myself down. So I just say, Rob, it's cool. It's cool, man. It's cool. Today's today. And again, sounds real naff, but I'll take 10 deep breaths, calm myself down, chill a bit, say just chill, and then just, look at the situation, take it for what it is. It's not about buttoning off or being lazy. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's just about being present in the moment, being grateful for everything that's on this earth, being grateful for what we've got around us. And a lot of people, they say to me, how do you balance, how do you get the work-life balance? Well, that's $1 million question. And I don't think anyone can really answer that. I just think you need to go with your mind. Like, if your mind's saying to you, I want to go fishing or whatever, then you sort of just have to listen to that subconsciously as a sign. And you can't go fishing every day. It'd be good if we could, but it's just the subconscious thing that's telling you this is something you really enjoy. It might be going shopping. It might be eating a really nice feed or watching a movie, whatever. But if you start hearing that, this is what I've learned. If you start hearing that, don't push it away. Don't push it away, because that is your mind saying, you need to do something here, because your head's getting full of shit and you're overdoing it, and you need to do something cool and positive. And so that's so I listen to that inner voice quite a lot now. And just going back to what you said, I do get emotional talking about it. And if there is anybody listening out that found that triggering, and please just sing out, because I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, and it didn't need to happen. This is the big thing. This is the message I'm trying to get across, and that's why I've been quite candid and open about it. It didn't need to happen. It shouldn't have happened. Probably all it would have taken was someone to ask me, hey, mate, are you okay? This is what I practice this now all the time, is to talk to somebody. And if you just sense it, the biggest thing I've learned from it, we've done a whole national tour, and we call it the Happy Banger Tour. We just went along and cooked sausages and got people talking. And the amount of people that opened up on that barbecue tour was phenomenal. Hundreds of people told us how bad they were feeling, but they left the barbecue feeling a lot better. So I think talking, there's Andrew and I have talked about it in the past, there's what we call a snippet in time that is so relevant, and so it's just critical that if you know of somebody, it doesn't matter if you think they are or not, just say, hey man, how's life, is everything okay? Now if you sense hesitation, if there's a hesitation, or just push harder. I mean, just push harder. I think we owe it to each other as humanity and to each other to I think COVID, has made us feel, it's distanced us, the mask thing, the whole lot. We can't see our faces. People are social animals. We're animal species, whatever you want to call us. We like seeing smiles. We like seeing eyes. I mean, that was all sort of taken away from us, rightly or wrongly. I think now we just have to, be a lot more community minded. And I know there's guys out there in the trade, doing it, working the long hours, doing it hard because of the staff. I mean, I've been in the same boat. Look, I as an owner, I still work. If we're short staffed, I'll jump in and make sausages. I mean, that's just how it is. So, the biggest message I want for anyone listening to this is please don't suffer in silence. You're definitely not alone. It's not something that you need to be ashamed of. In fact, you're a better person going, hey man, I need a hand here because shit's getting real, than having your family bury you, because doesn't help anybody. So
Yeah, and I'd like to let's summarize a little bit more about what you've just said. So we talked about here are all the signs that leads to this really negative space, where someone might get to a point where they have a plan to sort of hurt themselves, and what you want to do is prevent that. And what you also have highlighted is that a lot of these, having gone through that, and you don't have to get to that level of depression to even put in place the safety and the proactive well-being habits that you've described. So the most important thing is really understanding yourself, making sure that you build that self-awareness, because you will have different signs to the ones that Rob has, basically. And that's a really key part, is making sure that you are listening to yourself, that inner voice that Rob talked about. And it might be, I'm sleeping less. It might be that I don't want to hang out with my friends anymore. Whatever that is, you know what that sign is. Don't ignore it. Don't let it get worse. You might, we always say, you can skip one day of doing the good stuff, but don't skip 2 days, basically. The other thing that sounded like what was very important for you was around practicing gratitude and, finding joys in the little things. And basically Nate and Nicole mentioned that's one of the key parts of how they help people who are struggling in the construction industry, is helping people just find joy in the little things, because we can get so wrapped up with all the big things that it's very hard for us to solve quickly, that we can try and find moments in which there is joy to keep us going, that next step. Because that's really what it is. It's not easy to run a business. It's not easy being an employee, either in the construction or manufacturing industry. There's lots of subcontractors. And so there's a lot of pressure. We talked about the finances, etc. So, and I think the final thing is, like we were highlighting before, is just just give people the space to share. And if, as Rob said, you've identified there's a bit of hesitation, ask another question. And just try and probe. And sometimes people won't tell you the first go. They might not even tell you in that meeting, but maybe the next day they would reach out and say, hey, Rob, I know you asked me this question. Can we grab a coffee? Make that time. And, I know you might be busy, but you've opened a can of worms now. Make sure that you're supporting that person and again, referring them to support, if that's professional support. If you feel completely, overwhelmed about knowing how to support the people who have reached out to you with the help that they need. So, even as support people, you don't have to be alone. There are a lot of support systems out there that you can lean on as well. I am mindful that we should also ask a few questions that the people is top of mind for people as well. So maybe to kind of finish off, Rob, you described a very hectic work schedule, and you talked about how it's very hard to find work-life balance. Tell us what does that mean for you? How do you prevent yourself from getting back to having to work the 100 hours, not really sleeping, when there is all these pressures, there is these financial pressures, there's a staff shortage, there's, maybe a client unhappy, how do you manage when life can get very overwhelming?
It's a good question. I mean, how do I manage now compared to how I used to manage? I think now, like I say, I try to, well, with the staff, everyone involved is in our company, is that we keep it real, Angela. We keep it really, really real. So they know who I am. They know my history. They know my story. And I'm more of I am a boss and an owner, but I'm also I class all my staff that work for us as friends. I probably shouldn't, because sometimes it ends up, you do take a lot on board. But it's just how Beard Brothers is. That's just how we roll. Very unconventional. I'm the unconventional boss. Like I say, I don't even own a laptop. This is a very old school, the way everything's run. I try to get the work-life balance. I try to plan my weeks now, which was something I never used to do. I was never a great planner. I was just rip, shit, and bust, and threw caution to the wind and just went for it, And then, in fact, I had a meeting with Chris Quinn, the CEO of Foodstuffs. It was just a random meeting, and he said to me, "Shit, mate," he said, "You're like a jet boat, and you leave a lot of wake. You need people to sort the wake out." And so that's what we've done within the business, and they all know that I mean, it's naughty, but if something comes into my head at like 2:30 in the morning, instead of just lying there, like if it's an idea, I'll go, and I'll email, and I'll say, which I shouldn't do, and I tell myself, don't check emails until 7 in the morning, just because I randomly do. But that clears my mind. I know it's done. It sounds really weird, and I need to learn how to schedule them. But I'll write, if I've got heaps of stuff in my head going at night, I'll write it down. And so when I do wake up in the morning, I'm quite clear about what's going to happen. And then so now I'll go like, I'm going to take Friday afternoon off, take the kids fishing or whatever. We're going to go hunting for 3 days. And there's no compromise. That's it. That's it. And I used to feel embarrassed about taking a Friday off, even though 12 years of working my ass off. Look, I'll be honest with you, I still very rarely take a day off during the week. But I'm learning to like have a half a day Friday or something like that. But and that's what I do, and it's actually keeps me super more invigorated for the business. Like I love what I do. I love it. I love what I do. I used to begrudge it after my break. It was horrible, Now I love it. I just wake up every morning and it's like, this is on. It's cool. And so it's trying to keep that, that enthusiasm and all that sort of stuff. Look, I still have my dark times. Don't get me wrong. I mean, like I say, the last couple of weeks have been a bit tough, but I've managed to just get through it. There's been no bad thoughts, nothing. Just keep trucking and take time out, look at a tree, have a coffee, and just, it is what it is, I suppose, is what my favourite saying now is. It's my number one saying now to myself is, it is what it is, and make the most of any situation. I mean, that's pretty much it, really. Yeah.
That's great. One of the things that you've described really is around making sure we put systems and processes to manage our mind. Our mind can be both the most powerful tool, which keeps us going, like performance athletes, and work every day, like you've described. But we also need to know where our boundaries are, and to find ways to remove the mess in the mind, and simple things like writing things down so that you don't let your thoughts keep you up at night. So once you write it down, you'll be surprised how much relief that just gets released, and then you'll be able to sleep. And then the next morning, once you have a good amount of sleep, the thing that you were keeping you up all night doesn't seem as big as it was when you were lying in bed. One of the things that's quite interesting, I guess, about this industry, and not just in this industry, but one of the things that we see as clinicians quite often is around the self-medication using alcohol. I'm going to just turn to a bottle of wine or a pack of beer. Nate and Nicole, have you been able to see changes on how we can help people rely less on things that are not as helpful in terms of the more sustainable well-being practice. Would you like to share what you see in that context?
Yeah, the alcohol example is a great example to use here, in particular for it. It is a Kiwi culture, and particularly in our industry, and a male culture to catch up over a beer, to go and play sports and then drink after it. And it is the culture that we've been surrounded with for a long time. What society is now sort of moving towards is those zero alcohol or low percentage. And as the next generation comes through, then that is going to start to move away from being the alcohol dependent or turning to alcohol as that form of coping. As far as helping people with alcohol addiction or being reliant on alcohol, whether it be every night or at the weekend through binge drinking, it's breaking it down into why are they choosing that coping mechanism. Has it been a learned behaviour that they have been in an environment where they've grown up, where people are drinking every day, or is it been a learned behaviour from playing sports or working in this industry that they've then got the taste for it and it has been sort of either numbing or they're using it as an escapism for it as well. So it's working with individuals. There's a lot of great support programs out there, but it's also sort of weaving between that of what works for each person as well. You can go to a support network that would be spiritually run, where that will be run through somewhere like the City Mission or the Salvation Army, to another holistic run one that we've got some great examples down here in the south that would work for others as well. We're never going to fix that overnight. And again, it comes down to cultural aspects as well. Some cultures, again, where it is no alcohol, so they've then got other addictions that we would be looking into too. So it is each sort of individual case that we do need to look at. But I'm certainly grateful for the society that will be coming through in the society change. And also a great example of that was the Paddy Gower documentary around alcohol and the targeting vulnerable communities, having alcoholic liquor shops that are actually within communities within a short distance from each other as well, that there is no escape from it. It is that marketing flag that is flown in your face. And also with sports changing away from having them as a sponsorship as well is going to be a cultural change, because it's the only drug that someone will offer you, and if you say no, then they'll offer you again.
Yeah, and I know, Rob, that we've had a few discussions around people you've supported to get them out of addiction, especially when they're not in a good mental state. Is there anything you'd like to share that's addition to what Nate and Nicole have mentioned?
Yeah, I would actually. It was a very good point that you made about the it's the only thing you can share. And so when I had my episode, I actually gave up alcohol. So being in the wine industry all my life, wine was like water to me, and played rugby and hunting and all that sort of stuff. So it was a couple of heinies or 3 heinies a night and a bottle of wine for, I don't know, 25 years, 30 years, something like that. So I was heavily reliant on alcohol to bury a lot of stuff. So giving up the booze for me was I thought it was going to be really hard, but after about 2 weeks, each to their own, and if you can have a couple of beers, then good on you. But I couldn't. I was the one that couldn't put the top back on. So, for me personally, it was a massive step forward in the right direction. I mean, with depression or anything like that, the way I look at it, there's 3 key things I look at: nutrition, fitness, and then, pretty much what you put in your body. So I thought, well, I don't ever want to go back to that place, ever. I don't want to ever go back to that horrible spot. So if giving up booze is part of helping me not get there again, then I'll do it. If eating healthy is part of that thing, then I'll do it. If keeping fit is part of it, then I'll do it. So it's just giving myself the tools, and if you don't want a beer, just grow some balls and say, no, I don't want a beer. And if someone questions it and says, blah, 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 just say, well, here's a litre of milk, scull that. I mean, it's no different. I mean, if someone doesn't want a beer, they don't want a beer. I mean, it's cracks me up.
I've never heard that response before, Rob.
Yeah. And so I got a little bit of that, but everyone knows, but all my mates know what I'm like. I was the bloody biggest pissy that God put breath into. But once I stopped, I'm still the same guy. I'm still the last to leave a party if I go to a party, and I have heaps of fun and get up in the morning and go fishing because I haven't got a hangover.
No,
It's good.
nice. Yeah, and I think really what you're saying, right, is that look, you have to replace it with something else. You know, the negative thoughts, you need
100%.
to replace it with positive thoughts, right? The gratitude stuff. If you've got the alcohol, then let's replace it with healthy eating. Your body's designed to kind of fill the vacuum, so it's very hard to change something completely cold turkey. You need to try and find something to replace it, whether it's negative thoughts or behaviors. And Rob, one of the things that you have sort of done, which is basically you've allowed yourself to talk about your mental health and well-being. How do you encourage other people to do it? And I'd love to hear from Nate and Nicole as well. So why don't you kick us off, Rob?
How do I encourage people to sort of
to share about, like, if they are struggling and they've never done it before, to talk about that.
I'll just give it a go. I mean, look, there's various stages of feeling like you have a bad day or whatever, but if you really start feeling like, life is getting on top of you, but just talk. I mean, it's just talk. Just reach out to anybody. I mean, it can be a random on the side of the road. Just if you see them and say hello, just talk. I mean, I can't really say much more, really. I mean, I've helped a heck of a lot of people out since my episode. A lot of people. And all it is just asking them, hey, man, are you okay? And if they say, oh, no, not really, and you say, well, what's up? And then, like you say, they might not tell you that day, but 2 days later, you'll get a text and you'll say, oh, how did you know I was feeling like shit? And then quickly pick up the phone and say, what's up, mate? What can we do? And, I've had a couple of instances where I've ended up just total random people that have ended up going to rehab from just meeting them on the road. I mean, if you don't ask, you don't know. And if you're in that situation yourself, if you don't tell, then no one can help you. So you've just got to be open. Just be an open book. That's pretty much it, really, for me.
And I think that's what I love. Since we chatted, you talked to me about how many people's lives, complete strangers that you've helped and turned around. And these, some were meth heads, as you described, and they were young people who their parents were just devastated about what's going on. And so you've been a real light to the community. And I really want to say thank you to you, Rob, for what you've done. Nate and Nicole, anything you'd like to add around from, so people wanting to be tough and stoic and not show any vulnerability? What do you see helps with encouraging people to share about their mental health and well-being, whether the good or the bad?
I think on the back of pretty much what Rob said is just normalizing that conversation. There's a lot of power in normalizing it and just being more transparent and open in these conversations. And it's not always going to be like a quick overnight fix, especially in a work environment. As going back to Rob's example around his workplace, the environment there, about encouraging these conversations, being able to openly have these conversations and these discussions, is a really good way of actually drawing people into the space that, hey, maybe it's okay for me to speak up. If such and such is going through this, I'm experiencing the same thing, I can speak up and talk about it. So I've found heaps and a lot of benefit in just actually being able to talk and normalize that conversation. There really isn't much more to it, as Rob sort of touched on. It's just bringing that conversation to light and making people feel like it's a space where they can actually share their own story or speak up in that space.
That sounds good. Yeah, to wrap it off, really, as if you're a leader in the organization, a general manager, the CEO, or just a direct manager, don't discount the weight that you have when you share your story, because people do put you on a pedestal, and being able to share that really gives people the permission who are below you to be able to feel they can too. And when you ask people, are you okay? And they're not really responding, you can also kind of share your struggles. If you say, are you okay? And they say, yeah, I'm fine. And then you can say, oh, actually, I'm struggling. I'm not really sleeping very well. I have all these problems. And then you've given people permission because you've chosen to be vulnerable yourself as well. So those are just 2 final tips before we wrap off. Just to close off, we love to ask our guests around, what's the one thing that you do to stay well? Rob, why don't you kick us off?
What was that? Sorry?
What's the one thing that you do to stay well regularly? What's one regular well-being habit that you practice?
Oh, like I say, probably the meditation type thing, really, to be honest with you. Just the looking at the now and looking outside and looking at life, really. I mean, life's my drug now, so that's, yeah. I love fishing and hunting, but just looking at what we've got around us and just be grateful.
Amazing. What about you, Nicole?
That's a great example, Rob, for it. For me, I love to travel, and with that travel, then I get out there either walking or running. So I'm on my way to Queenstown this weekend to run I'm not doing the full marathon, but I'll be taking part in one of the distances down there and doing that with friends as well. So that time away from work, time away from home, but actually enjoying what we have in this country as well.
Beautiful. And to finish us off, Nate, what about you?
And similar again, a lot of it for me is definitely the physical aspect. I've been physical most of my life. For me, getting out there, hitting the gym, but I also like, similar to Rob, is just getting out in nature and just taking in our surroundings, because we're pretty lucky here in New Zealand in terms of what we got in our backyard. So actually utilizing that, and there's a lot of peace in that.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much to our beautiful guests who've been very vulnerable, especially Rob, around what has happened in your life and how you've turned things around. I hope that you've got an insight around what can be applicable in your organization for yourself, for someone that you're supporting. It's been great being able to kind of have partners like UniMed, like Timescapes, who have shared it with their clients to make sure as many people as possible know about how to stay well in the construction and manufacturing industry. And thank you, Rob. If you want great sausages, check out Beard Brothers. If you need a bit more peer support and support there around the construction industry, there's Mates in Construction. And of course, if you need good EAP support that's personalized and culturally responsive, come speak to us at Clearhead. We're happy to help. So thank you, everyone, and have a really lovely afternoon. Bye.
Ka kite.